Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Love, Laughs, and Lessons. And this is our sex series. Let's talk about sex. We are here with another amazing guest. And before we jump into introducing her, I'm going to hand it over to my co-host, Denise Ray.
Thank you, Dr. Frankie. I'm Denise, and we are super excited to introduce a very special guest, Claire Perelman, a dynamic sex therapist and licensed clinical social worker from the Bay Area. Claire is very dedicated and passionately uses her platform to challenge and expand norms around sexuality and pleasure through her social media presence at SexClarified and her therapeutic work. Claire aims to destigmatize various aspects of human sexuality, including kink and polyamory and pleasure without penetration. So I'm like so into this conversation right now. Her commitment extends into the community, organizing and advocating for social justice and sustainable initiatives. Claire offers individual and couples counseling, adaptly navigating the complexities of sexual relationships and identity. So whether it's in her offices in San Fran and Oakland or via Zoom across California, she's making significant impacts on her clients' lives. So welcome, Claire.
Yay. Wow, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. That was a beautiful introduction. Thank you.
So, of course, my first question, and I know this is like the obvious, but I want you to tell our audience, what is sex therapy?
So that's a great question because it can be very confusing. Sex therapy is talk therapy. We don't touch our clients or interact with them physically. It's mental health therapy that is focused on sex and relationships and sexuality. We have extra training, credentialing, expertise in those areas. So I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a licensed therapist, and I have all this extra training about sex and sexuality. So what I like to tell my clients is that nothing scares me, and I've probably heard it before.
Mm-hmm. I know, it's like, this is the topic of sex is so hard for folks to talk about. I think in general, they get clammed up and pretty uncomfortable quickly. So I try to find a way to ease their anxiety and their nerves around it. But I don't know, do you find that too? It's just a hard topic?
Oh, yeah. I think that's one of my main focuses in doing more like macro level community work and doing social media is that I think that it's really hard to talk about sex and that people are not taught how to talk about sex and that it's really uncomfortable. And so I think that the more practice we get around talking about it, the easier it gets to do it. And the more that people are able to normalize it and the more that I can model talking about sex, I hope that it makes an impact on other people's lives to make it a little bit easier to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Who would you say, just in your experience, is most uncomfortable talking about sex?
Ooh, I think people raised in purity culture, I think it goes so deep and it just penetrates like every inch of you. And I think that growing up hearing that sex is a sin or that, God forbid the kind of sex that you want to have or like to have or the fantasies that you have or bad or sinful or going to get you sent to hell, I think makes it really difficult, even if you've left purity culture, to be able to then move through navigating talking about sex.
Or even like people who they weren't exposed to having it, like it wasn't a sex positive environment where conversation around sex, masturbation, any like intimacy, that kind of stuff, then they just never, right? That neuronal pathway didn't get developed. So it's just awkward when the topic even comes up. They kind of just freeze.
Yeah.
My mother was like very sex positive and she was like so open, maybe too open. I was giving class, and telling people because my mother told me everything. So at 9, 10, and 11, I was telling all my peers what my mother had.
That's amazing.
I know I got in a lot of trouble. Trouble. That's where we learned that she was like, what happens in this house and what we talk about stays in this house. That's not your job, Denise. So
I
can see
young Denise doing that, like just trying to be helpful. And then the parents finding out.
Yes.
Like, oh no. Yeah. It's funny, the dinner conversations at my house with a group of, like, we have teenagers here, several of them, two 19-year-olds and a 15-year-old, and anything goes. Like just last
Oh,
night was
yeah.
anal sex and lube. And we
I
have
love
a
that.
blended family. So they grew up around me, my kids, that very sex positive, talking about, I mean, they've heard me through several doors as a therapist for years, working from home, and they occasionally will hear certain things. They're used to it. But then my partner's kid, not so much. So it's just like, we're just rolling with it here.
What a culture shock for your partner's
Right.
kid. Totally. But that's
And-
amazing.
Right? Yeah. It's like, and he just sort of rolls with it. You can tell he does, you know, it makes him a little uncomfortable, but he's not trying to say, shut it down. I'm so proud of him. 15-year-old boy that has not been exposed in this way.
That's really tough, especially at
That's-
15.
Yeah.
But he's
Yeah.
probably wondering about all of these things.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
Important
Exactly.
info. That's the kind of dinner table that I hope to have in the future. So you're giving me a lot of inspiration.
I think like Denise's mom, that you just kind of have, you just anything is up for discussion, and kids bring up these topics when they're ready to learn more. So we should
Yeah.
never shut them down or avoid or deflect. We should sit and be curious about what it is they're wondering about. And I think parents get scared, right? That they're going to say the
100%.
wrong thing, and they
Mhm.
shut it down.
Yeah, I actually used to work with kids, not doing sex therapy, but doing clinical work in schools. And I worked across the public school system, elementary, middle, high school. And kids are curious, they want to know what's going on. Teenagers, especially when they're thinking about having sex, or, they're doing some kind of sexual activity with their peers. It can be a really unsafe place for them to explore with no one to ask. And so as their therapist, a lot of times in the high school, I would get questions of, what do I do here? How does this thing work? Like, what do I do when they interact like this? And I think that it's so important to be able to have those conversations with them.
And if they're
Yeah.
coming to you and asking, and you're not giving them the answer, you best know they're going to go to somebody else, and you have no idea what kind of response they're going to get.
Exactly.
right.
Or they're going to stop asking, and then they're just going to, worry through it and not know what they're
Mhm.
doing.
Right. And
Try
possibly
to figure it out.
bad
Yeah.
choices,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what's your share with us, Claire? What's something you would like? Yeah. What do you want to talk about? And like, let's just dive in.
Well, outside of my clinical work with kids, that was in the past. Now I do sex therapy with adults. And one of the things that I love talking about is erection challenges. I find that is something that, like, so many of my clients bring up, and that on my social media, people are like DMing me about and asking about, and it's on every side, like whether or not the person has a penis or not, they want to know about erection challenges because their partner has a penis, or, they do, or something. And I just think it's a thing that's not talked about enough.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah.
Agreed.
So what are
What are,
common? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
I mean,
I was going right where you're going.
what are people asking you about, and share with us? Yeah.
I think the first thing that I really want people to shift their mindset around is that people talk about ED, right? They talk about erectile dysfunction, but I think that is an incorrect term, and that it really stigmatizes what I think we should be calling erection challenges, because it's
I like
not.
that.
Yeah, thank you. It's not generally erectile dysfunction. Like, it's not a dysfunction. That sounds like something you can't shift. It sounds like you're
Yes.
broken. It sounds like,
Yeah. It's
like you have.
pathologizing.
Yes,
For sure.
exactly. And even as a therapist, I am not into pathologizing.
Yeah.
And so I think when my clients come in and they say, I have ED or whatever, and I say, okay, you're having challenges with your erections. They say, my partner's having ED. And I say, oh, okay, they're having challenges with their erections. And I want them to reframe that, because having challenges is something that we can move through. So I think that's the first thing. And I'm curious what y'all think about that.
No, yeah. I like that. I like the reframing. And I feel like, when people talk about ED, that they think it's something that old people experience.
Yes.
Right. So I'm at the prime. Well, I'm over my prime, and I no longer function properly.
Yes.
Right. So yeah. So what
It's
are
so
some of the
stigmatized.
Yeah. What
Go
are
ahead.
some of the misconceptions about erectile challenges?
Yeah, thank you. I think you said one that's so good is that people think it quote unquote only happens to old people, or that it suddenly means that their dick is broken. Like I get that feedback a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Or that they take this bodily challenge that's happening and then they decide the narrative on it, right? Like that's how a lot of things work in our lives. And just like if I didn't sleep enough the last night and then I woke up today and I was tired, but then I decided that that meant that my body was no longer functioning and I'm always going to be tired forever. That's kind of what happens. And I get it because it's so important. People want their erections to work the way they used to work. They want them to be, hard and stay hard and all of that kind of stuff. But I think that one of the misconceptions is that erections are a reliable resource. I like to tell people that they're not. They're not a reliable resource. And we have somehow decided and given the social narrative that erections should just happen on command. They should stay hard for 2 hours. That erections should look like they do in porn. Or that one of the misconceptions is that if you don't hold your erection or your erection doesn't show up when you want it to, that somehow means that's how you feel about your partner, or it
Yeah.
means that you need to be having different kind of sex, or it means that you no longer like sex anymore. There's all these different narratives that come up.
Or the partner blames themselves. Like,
Oh yeah.
I'm not a good enough
Yes.
partner for you. What am I
Yes.
doing wrong? And it's like, wait a minute, it may have nothing to do with you. It's
That
just
is the
that,
hardest part for
yeah,
people. Yeah, I'm sure you see this too in your
all the
office.
time.
It's people take it so personally, and it's hard not to, right? It's really, really hard not to if you're having sex with someone who has a penis and then their penis used to get really hard and then now it's not getting really hard, or it's not staying as hard or whatever. And then deciding that the thing I hear the most is they don't think I'm attractive anymore. They're no longer attracted to me. And that is such a damaging narrative because it's not true almost 99% of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think now, I think probably it used to be more the case where in middle age, right? Testosterone, my cat's making an appearance, testosterone, right? It takes a big dip, and then, you start having difficulty maintaining a really hard erection if you had one that was hard in the past and maybe not as long and so on. But my sense and the research I think shows that actually younger people now are having challenges, erectile challenges. And have often wondered if it's just too much exposure to porn.
I have done a lot of talking about how porn is not, I feel like people in my generation, we all like know colloquial, they're like, oh yeah, porn isn't actually what sex looks like. But then most of the people in my age range, like 30s, 40s, have been watching porn since they were like 12, 14. And even if you know on a certain level that porn is not an accurate depiction of how people's erections work, it's still something that you internalized at 12, 13, 14 when you were
That's
first
right.
like
Yeah.
playing with your erection.
Yes.
What are
I,
some of the
yeah.
factors that contribute to challenges, erection challenges?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it can be anxiety. That's one of the main things that I work with, some type of anxiety. And I think, there might be an initial reaction of like, well, I don't have anxiety in bed, or my partner doesn't have anxiety around having sex with me. We've had sex hundreds of times. And it can be, I've seen a lot of clients who start to get erection challenges when they start trying for a baby with their partner. And suddenly there's all this pressure around their dick performing and making a human out of it, and their life is going to change. And so like, obviously your erection might fluctuate because there's all this stuff coming up when you're having sex. Or when people start exploring queer sex for the first time, like maybe their erection goes up and down, or maybe it's not available at all. And that can be really difficult for people. I also think the other thing that I think is not talked about enough that I actually didn't learn until I started studying to be a sex therapist was that heart health and erection health, or challenges, go hand in hand. And so much of the time, my clients, young, older, whatever, they'll have stopped working out consistently. Like, let's say they used to be big runners or they used to lift weights, and then something will have happened. It's not a conscious choice, but a couple years down the line, now they're having erection challenges. And when we go back and we realize, oh, you used to be working out all the time, sometimes they just add that back in and we are not experiencing as much erection challenges.
What about weight gain? Isn't that another one that really can,
I think like a shift in body composition, a shift in the way, I mean, weight gain, it makes it harder on your heart a bit, right? And that's a different space that your heart is working through. And so sometimes that can impact the blood flow to the erection.
I have always felt for people with a dick, the pressure that
so much pressure
they have on them to perform.
Like and to continue to perform.
Get erect, and you better stay erect.
And you better, that's right.
I've always had such compassion, like even in my experiences of being intimate, I will often say there's no pressure. It's about just being here and enjoying each other, and no expectations. Like, take the pressure off of them. I feel like the outcome will be in everybody's favor if we do that,
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate. I feel like I'm like, leading a movement here. I'm attempting to lead a movement of like let's decenter insertive sex. But I'm so passionate about it because that is part of the biggest issue, is that we are obsessed as a society across genders, across like gay, straight spectrum, obsessed with having hard and long erections. And it's just not, you can't control it.
Yeah.
And yet we are centering it on like, it's like we are centering definitely having a sneeze. Like, it's only going to be good if you sneeze in this way specifically.
Right.
It reminds me of being fixated on the orgasm, on the O.
Yes. Yes.
That puts so much pressure on you, especially as a female. I mean, it's harder to orgasm. And we lose sight of like, what about the journey towards orgasm? And, we're missing out on enjoying
so much other pleasure. That's right.
Yeah, 100%. I find that is the thing that trips up so many of my clients for so long, is that they have to reframe the way that they are approaching sex. Because if it's always been about orgasm and it's always been about a hard dick for a certain amount of time, then they kind of look at me and they're like, well, what else is there? How do I find pleasure? And I'm curious how y'all have approached that in like the spaces that you work in too.
Yeah, so you're curious about how we talk about how to say that again, because I want to make sure
like how you try and reframe for people that like there is so much other pleasure to be had outside of insertive sex and outside of like reaching an orgasm.
Yeah, like just talking about all the different ways and normalizing it. And like, people have these rules. They're like, oh, I'm anti-sex toy. Not me, but they'll come up, they'll be like, no, it's not natural. It can't no sex toys because that's not natural. It's like, who said that's another way, another tool to experience pleasure? Why aren't we saying yes to these opportunities to connect with our person and just elevate the experience? Some women can't actually climax without a lot of pressure and a lot of vibration. And they're going through life not realizing if they got a vibrator, a Hitachi magic wand, possibly, that they would experience an orgasm because they just need more. That's not enough pressure, not enough stimulation to actually reach it.
Yeah.
So I just normalize, and I just, I like offer different ideas and like just see what the reaction is and where's the resistance, and really explore like, hey, right? Because sometimes we don't realize where we're getting stuck. And as therapists, we have to mirror, like, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of resistance around that. What does that mean? Or when people start to tear up, it's like, you're crying right now. What's coming up for you? And it's just, sometimes they've got to like, we have to peel back the layers
Yeah.
And see, like, were we shamed at some very important developmental stage?
Mm-hmm.
And that caused us to get really kind of rigid about certain things, you know?
Yeah.
So I stay curious, even if you're not in therapy. I would say just like be curious about like why am I saying no? Why?
Mm.
What is it that's causing me to say no? Often it's fear of the unknown,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you
I
know,
fully agree.
or like feeling like a fool, looking silly. There's all of this like
Yes. Yes.
you want to look like you are always looking sexy and you're in the right. I hear that a lot in my office. Like
Mm-hmm.
You're in the right
people,
position, in the
yes,
right
Mm-hmm.
pose.
body
Yeah.
image stuff.
Yeah. Body image stuff is huge. Or like
Huge.
being good at sex. I hear that
Yes.
a lot too. Like I
Oh,
want to be good at it.
yeah, yeah.
And really what
But
makes
not
you,
so good that I
oh
look
yeah,
like I know too. Yeah, not
right.
so
Right.
good that
Yes.
I look like I've done it too much, but just good
Mm-hmm.
enough. Yeah. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Frankie.
No, it's true. I think what makes you good at sex is your ability to be present and
Yes.
paying attention to the person you're with and listening to their sounds, watching their body, responding to their desire, their expression of desire that might not be coming through verbally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it doesn't always mean an erection,
Right. Yes.
right?
Bringing it
So it doesn't
home.
mean try harder, do more, go faster,
Right.
go slower. Sometimes it is just, it is right
Yeah.
here. Yeah. That's interesting, huh?
Yeah. I really I want to circle back to like the compassion that y'all mentioned about like dick owners to have all of this performance on them. And I think that that's something that really isn't discussed enough. It's just like a thing that is implied, like, oh yeah, well, of course he's gonna stay hard or whatever, right? And it's like, dude, that's a lot to put on. And the other thing that I also think about is many times people with dicks are one expected to stay hard and like get hard, stay hard, and then also much of the time if they're having straight sex are responsible for their partner's orgasm as well. And so they're responsible and then they also have to come. And so they have
And
like
not too
all of these,
fast,
right,
not too
not too
fast,
fast.
and
Exactly.
not be prioritizing like they
Them.
have
Oh.
to find a
Mm-hmm.
way to slow down and not make it feel like it's all about them all the time, that they
My
come
God,
first.
yes.
That comes up
Yes.
too. It's like this is a human function. We don't have control over, I mean, some of us have more control than others, but
Mhm.
when it's happening, it's like the train left the station.
Right.
It's gonna explode at some point, and they're gonna do the best they can. But we can't be angry at them when
Right.
they come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
And it
think
Or
doesn't
this
have
is
to be over. Like
right.
this sense,
Thank
yeah.
you.
but there's some messaging out there though too, Denise, in response to that. That's like people with dicks once they come, it's over for them. They just want to snore. They want to take a nap. They want to smoke a cigarette, kind of thing, which isn't the case for every person that has a penis.
Right. Right. And
Some
for some people it is. And so like
Right.
manage, plan out the sex so that you can plan for that. If you know that you're gonna like want to smoke a cigarette, fall asleep immediately after you come, like then maybe you do want to make sure that your partner comes first so that you can like all have the same kind of inclusive pleasure, whatever. Or like not focus on the orgasm, as we said. And for many other people with dicks, they're not done after they come. They've simply come and then they can continue the play.
And sometimes they can come more than once.
Yes.
That's right. And sometimes they don't want to come at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm sure you will all preach with me to talk about sex before you have it so you can move through these things because there's so much there's so much implied that people are just assuming about sex. Like, oh, well, of course he wants to come, or of course he wants to this, or of course she wants to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you don't know that. You ask.
Right.
Even
Yeah.
if you've had sex 100 times with that same person, maybe they want something different.
And have a conversation, communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you know, as somebody with a dick, you might say like, I'm going to do my best to like
Mm-hmm.
hang in there for you.
Yeah.
but it may
Or
not happen. And I got you.
Exactly. Or say, hey, this is how my dick works. I will come in the first couple minutes and then I'm gonna go to fucking town on you. Like that, this is
Yeah.
just how like this part of my body functions, and it's cool. Like I think it's also that there's so much shame around it. And when people are able to kind of present it as like, hey, this is like how my body works, and I'm not going to be ashamed of it. And like, this is how I would love to collaborate with you on how to make that work for you. That's hot.
Yeah, that's right. As opposed to you come really quickly and then now she's forgiving you.
Uh-huh. Or
Or
you have
he's
some kind of
forgiving.
rupture around
That's
it.
right, right. It's okay. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's so horrible.
There's
It's so
another
hard. Yeah.
misconception. Hold on, I want
Mhm.
to just throw something else out there. So many layers to this craziness, but
I'm ready.
just all the misperceptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are plenty of dudes running, or people with penises running around that believe their cock needs to be huge.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Oh
And
my
I'm like, wait a
God.
minute, no, most women, it's painful. They don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
Can you
one
talk
wants
Yeah.
about
like,
that a little bit?
yeah, nobody
Yeah.
wants.
I think, yeah. I think that there are people who do enjoy that. And I think that I mean, the average penis size is 5.5 inches. Like that is the literal average.
Is
And
that hard? That's
it's,
erect.
yeah, hard, erect. And I mean, I understand where it came from, but I don't know why we're so committed to the narrative that a big dick is better, because it's not. And
Yeah,
people, you hear that phrase, it's not the size of the boat, it's the motion of the
it's the motion of
ocean.
the ocean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
how you use it that matters.
It's how you use it. It's how you approach sex. It's how you communicate.
Mhm.
There are so many ways to navigate fucking with a dick. It's there. I feel like we're limiting ourselves if we've already decided that a piece of our body is not good enough. And I mean, I really feel like that could be generalizable across people's bodies, but there is an obsession with giant dicks for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. And I could hear the audience saying, the bigger the better. I could like, you could, yeah, because that's what women also say that
Yes.
some
Mm,
women say that they want,
Well, they feed into the
right?
narrative, I think, because
What's he
that's what they've
packing?
been told.
Yeah, that's what,
mm-hmm,
yeah.
So they feed
mm-hmm,
into, they think it's cool when they're talking about dicks. They're like, I like a big dick. I like a fat dick, a thick dick. And they're
mm-hmm,
and then, right, people are hearing this and they internalize that, and right, and it's just like, if I don't have a porn star dick, then I've got
mm-hmm.
No,
not desirable,
I'm
it's
not
not big
worthy.
enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's so shitty because we're
it is.
limiting so much pleasure. I think it's also really prevalent in the gay male community, that like size matters so much. And I just think I think the way that we can look at it is like, oh, it's so sad for us, that for all of us, that we are not able to access all of the pleasure, all of the fun and excitement and people attached to those dicks, whatever size they are, because we've decided that our limited definition of hotness is a giant cock.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah.
And like, wouldn't it be
Jeez.
nice to have so many other, as I like to say, like, how wouldn't it be nice to expand our sexual vocabulary? Like my mentor taught me that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like we're only reading one page of the book. That's so boring.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How do you introduce that conversation to couples to have, to have,
After I'm smiling because you have to do it very delicately, right? Um, After building a good amount of rapport with them and really joining with them, compassion, blah, 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 then I will inevitably say something like that. I will say, you know, how limiting this is, that if you are committed to having this partner, but you're also committed to having this limiting belief around your partner's dick doesn't work the way you want it to, then that is the life you've committed yourself to. Like you can get out of that relationship, which is always an option that I give my clients. I'm pretty direct in session. And or like if you're telling, because then they sit across the, couch from me and they're like, no, I don't want to leave my partner, but also I'm sitting here saying his dick isn't working the way I want him to. Okay, how can we work with that then? How can we embrace your partner for who they are? How can we access so much more pleasure that is outside this small version of what you think a dick should work like, look like, function like? And then honestly, that usually takes off a lot of the pressure once they're able to let that go. And then things inevitably feel a little different.
Yeah. And do you find in general people come around to thinking out of the box in this like linear constricted way?
I really try to help them come around. Sometimes they don't want to, and then they might not want to keep talking about it, or they might, try a different therapist, whatever. It's not personal. But I mean, I try and encourage this across like social media, across the people that I talk to in my personal life. But I think it's hard because I think that it's really working against such an intense cultural narrative. But I think that also once people start to practice it, like that's another thing is that I encourage my couples to practice having sex that doesn't center insertive sex, that doesn't even have insertive sex, or that doesn't center a hard dick at all. Or, we try and come up with all of these other ways so that they can really see it outside of just like talking about it.
Yeah.
What do y'all think?
No, I love that idea. I do
I
too.
hope people are listening and taking some notes. That's
and
what
taking some notes. That's right.
I love making a sex menu with my clients.
What's that?
Yeah.
Have y'all worked with that before?
No.
Okay.
Sex
This is one of
menu.
my favorite interventions.
Sex menu.
Yeah, I have them make a sex menu, and sometimes if they are struggling with the idea, we'll do it all together in session. Other times I'll assign it as a home assignment. And my first assignment of it is always, okay, you have to have 4 categories. We're going to have appetizers, main courses, desserts, and then side dishes. And then if they're feeling really fun, I also give them sauces, and they have to put at least 2 items into each category. And inevitably, tell me, what would y'all maybe put in the main course?
Wow. Oral sex?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. See, that's even beyond the thoughts that normally come from my clients. It's normally only penetrative sex in main course.
Only really?
Usually, much of the time. And they will put oral sex as potentially appetizers. Maybe they'll put it as a side. Some couples will put oral sex, but most of the time it's some kind of penetrative sex only in the main course. And the point that I try and make with the sex menu is wherever they've put insertive sex, I tell them that that their next assignment, this is after many sessions, that their next assignment is to order something off the sex menu that they both agree on and talk about it before they have to order it, like days ahead. And if they get to the part, if they actually get to the date and then they don't want to do it, they can renegotiate, right? Because you don't have to force to do any kind of sex act, but they're not allowed to order anything that has insertive sex. And so that is part of the challenge for them. So first they've created all these things, and I tell them that talking about sex and having sex can be like going to a really nice restaurant. Part of the fun of going to a really nice restaurant is talking about what you're going to order with your partner. It's getting dressed. It's looking at the menu. Maybe you're like a real foodie and you're like, ooh, we're going to get the appetizer here. We're going to get this. We're going to get that. This all goes together. And I also like to remind my couples that sometimes you go, let's just say you're getting American food, and like you usually get a hamburger and fries and it's so good. And that's what you get like every week. But sometimes you go and all you want are fries and a milkshake. And it is just as good. And so that's how I try and frame it for them, that like, okay, we're going to order the fries and a milkshake and make it just as good, because so much of the time we're just so focused on the hamburger that we're like not giving the fries and milkshake enough of a shot.
And why is that? What is it that it feels intimidating to commit to like having a 2-hour makeout session, or
People just aren't doing it. They just don't think about it past like the honeymoon stage. I found that, you know, couples
Wow.
years and years in have committed to the cultural narrative that like having sex, quote unquote, is penetrative sex.
And
And
that's the goal.
that's the goal. And then if we're not doing it, we haven't had a satisfying sexual session.
Yeah.
And this goes for gay, straight, everyone. And that what I'm trying to encourage them to do is to be reminded that like, yeah, 2-hour makeout session is so hot. And it used to be so hot. We used to do that. But once people start having insertive sex, I find that they're like, okay, everything else is off the table. Like everything else is foreplay. And it's not.
yeah.
Oh, that's so true.
Are people still engaging in foreplay first, or is it jumping? Is that the idea, or is it
I
just
think like when they do when they're having sex, when they show up in my office.
Yeah, so like in my practice for years, there was a lot of talk around, really prioritizing foreplay. Like people with dicks would be focused on, right, the having actual intercourse, and it's like, let's dial this back and make out, right? Like petting, grinding, right? And then at the end, you finish off with, right, intercourse, if that's what
Yeah.
I wonder if that has shifted at all.
Yeah, it's, people I find who come to me and are having big challenges around intercourse, I find that, yeah, they're doing foreplay somewhat, but it's not that big of a focus. And there's just so much focus and anxiety around the intercourse that I just take it off the table altogether. I'm like, okay, this is like very, very stressful for y'all. So like, why do we keep doing it? Let's just like put it on pause for a month or 2 months. Generally, I do it for 90 days. But and sometimes clients will kick and scream and they'll be like, we're here to have more intercourse. Why are you taking it off the table? But it's just like, if you're doing this thing every single day, that's so effing stressful. And why do we keep going back to it? Let's just pause, really focus on the other things and get all the enjoyment out of that and remind ourselves that those can be just as satisfying. And then once we've taken some of the pressure off of sex, off of like intercourse and sex in general, then we can go back to it. So that's kind of what I have been seeing. Or that they'll do foreplay and be like, it's just not the same. That's what I get a lot.
It's not the same since you've taken sex off the table.
Or just like, even if I didn't take sex off the table and I'll be like, oh, do you ever do, some oral sex or fingers or, whatever, hands? They're like, yeah, but it's just not as good. It's just not as satisfying.
And is it because of that mindset? Because this is what we do to get to sex?
That's what I think. Yeah. I think it's because it's
this
like,
is not a standalone.
Right.
This is from.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Would you say more often than not, your clients will cooperate and follow through on the homework assignments? And
yeah,
they do? Oh, good.
I think if they don't like it, they just stop coming back. I mean, I think that often they won't do the home assignments, but then, we have a nice conversation about what's stopping them from doing the home assignments.
Yeah. Or where one person in the partnership is really like on it and the other one has resistance or, a ton of excuses in working with that.
Then I tell them that they're each 100% responsible.
Yeah. One person should not have to carry the whole relationship in terms of,
yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So
everyone's already doing enough.
So I guess, I don't know that you can answer this question, but for listeners, I'm thinking, because they might be thinking, well, am I struggling? Like what point do they come to you? They feel like, okay, now we are having an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm curious your answer. I have an answer. I think it's when you feel like you have talked the thing to death or that you're going in fucking circles or you keep having the same fight and you're not getting any relief from it is when you can come to me. I mean, I think you can come to me anytime, but I think those are the moments where people are like, okay, let's get like a third person in here to help us just move through this. And I think the main thing that I want to make a point of is that it doesn't mean your relationship is broken. It doesn't mean you're definitely going to break up. It doesn't mean any of those things. It simply means that you are two people who are so close to the issue that it is too difficult to navigate together. And so why not have a third person that is trained in helping you figure it out?
Yeah, I think people get scared because they're
Oh,
afraid
yeah.
it means that there is a rupture or, you know, an irreparable situation, and they're going to therapy. The therapist is going to help them break up.
Mm-hmm.
So they have fear, and I want to kind of, bust that myth that it's just, we're here to help people find joy and happiness in their relationship, whatever that is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I had clients a couple of years ago now who came in and they were so freaked out. They were like a couple of years into their relationship. They were so freaked out because they had libido differences. One person wanted to have sex more than the other person, and they were convinced that they were going to break up and that I was going to tell them that they were just fucked. And by the end of our work together, they were happy and now they're engaged.
You're like, this
So
is very normal.
Yeah.
Most people are not aligned perfectly in terms of their sex drive and libido.
Mm-hmm.
The question is how you navigate. Like, how are you both
Yes.
like meeting in the middle around this?
Yes. And that was so helpful for them just to like hear that. That was like the visible relief that I could see coming out of their bodies. Like they were just like, oh, okay. And I was like, yeah, yeah, just a big sigh. And I was like, it's all good. It's okay, y'all.
Oh, it's so hard. Like, I'll have clients come in and tell me, oh, I read this such and such, or I saw this on TikTok or Instagram, and they are like really believing it like to be
Yeah.
true. And it's just like, wait a minute, hold on. This is so far out there, so far from the truth.
Yeah.
It just is a little I like, my heart hurts sometimes when I'm thinking how many people are being fed this inaccurate information that's even backed by numbers. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know what research this is, or, you know, but they're backing it up with some numbers, and they believe it to be true. And there's a lot of unreliable data out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think things like y'all's podcast is so important, because that is free information for people to learn how to navigate these things in a different way than the cultural like norm of not telling us anything about sex.
Yeah. And from professionals. There are these like
Mhm.
TikTok
That's
and
right.
Instagram celebrities that don't have a
Mhm.
board certification in sex therapy, are not licensed therapists, and they're spouting off all this stuff that is totally wrong and creating all this anxiety and
So much
problems for us.
anxiety. There's
Yeah.
there's already enough anxiety and pressure around sex. We don't need any more.
No, yeah. So yeah, I'm so glad that you're doing the work that you're doing, because it's so
Thank
needed.
you.
There are not enough of us doing
Yeah,
this work.
I fully agree.
Yeah.
I feel like a wild person walking through like parties and things when I meet people and they go, "Oh my God, you're a sex therapist?" And it's like I am, so exciting.
I
But
bet.
it's
But
necessary.
are they asking you questions, or are they just, oh my God, you're a sex therapist, and then they're just like, okay.
It
Avoiding.
depends. I think that happens. Sometimes people come up to me and like ask me very specific sexual clinical questions, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is like being a doctor at a party, and they're like "Can you diagnose my ear infection?"
That's right.
Do they
It
ever
hurts when I do
eroticize
this.
you?
Wait, I'm sorry.
Do they
Do
ever
we?
eroticize you?
Oh, yes. Oh my God. I mean, at this, like, I feel like already I was talking about this with one of my colleagues the other day who I used to work with, being a therapist, and dating, or even just like talking to people, can be like, there's this weird like therapy fantasy I've found that people are like, ooh, you're a therapist. And it's like, okay, it's okay. No, I'm not
You
gonna
know
like,
how to seduce me.
yeah, exactly, exactly. If people are real weird, I will look at them and be like, yeah, you have issues with your mom, right? And And then they'll lose it and I'll be like, I can't continue this conversation. I have to leave. But yeah, they totally eroticize me now that I'm a sex therapist. It's a whole different level of, oh, that must mean you're so good at sex, or oh, that must mean da da da. And I'm like, you can't make those assumptions just because this is the field that I work in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's not, that is an immediate, like, no, if you were trying to hit on me, it's not going to happen now.
Yeah. Right. The best one that I get all these years for like 2 decades, it's,
Yeah.
are you analyzing me? And I'm
yeah.
like, oh no, I'm not working right now, but if you want to pay me, we could talk about.
Yeah. If you want to, that will be $300.
And then I'm
Shout
just
out.
irritated. I'm like, can you be more original? Like, come up with a more original comment.
Come
Like,
up with something funny.
yeah. I just sound like a jerk, but it's true. After how many years can you hear the same comment again and again, you know?
Oh yeah. Oh God, I think this was pre-pandemic. I was on the apps and people were DMing me and they were like, oh, this is before I was a sex therapist. So it just said therapist in my bio. And they were like, oh, you're a therapist? Like, I need a therapist. And I would write back and say, that's concerning. I was like, this is not sexy. This is not a way to hit on
Good
me.
answer.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Oh, I
Match
need a
their
therapist.
ridiculousness.
Yeah. Like, oh, I can direct you to psychology today.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
help you find one. It's not me.
On that note, Claire, how can folks find you?
Yeah, not in my DMs. They can find me at SexClarified, spelled normally, not like my name, with a D at the end, SexClarified, on all platforms. Or you can find me on my website, sexclarified.com, or you can find me guesting on podcasts, and all of that is also on my website and my Instagram.
Amazing.
Amazing.
I can tell Denise really thoroughly enjoyed having you on.
Yes.
I did too. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And we'll have to have you back sometime.
Yes, I'd love that.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you all next time. Kisses, hugs. Bye.
Bye.